The sun hung low, casting long shadows over the cracked earth. Dust swirled in the air, a constant reminder of the desolate world they now lived in. The human, a man of few words and fewer smiles, walked through the ruins of what used to be a bustling city. Now, it was just a ghost of its former self. His boots kicked up debris as he moved cautiously, eyes scanning the horizon. He had no choice but to survive. Food was scarce, and hope even more so. But survival was his way of life. He had learned to trust only himself. The world outside had changed, and so had he. Gone was the man who once relied on others. Now, everything was about one thing: staying alive. He reached the edge of what remained of a once vibrant marketplace. The rusted remains of old vehicles and toppled stalls dotted the area, with only the faintest signs of life, some rats, a few crows. Nothing more. Then, a flash of movement caught his eye. He paused, gripping the handle of his worn knife. He had learned to be careful. Danger came in many forms. The shadows shifted again. And there, crouched behind a broken stall, was a figure. At first, he thought it was just another scavenger. But as he stepped closer, the shape became clearer, and his heart skipped a beat. She was different. She knelt down, her blue skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Her long white hair cascaded around her shoulders, framing her face like some strange angel from another world. She was beautiful, but in a way that was both captivating and terrifying. Her sharp features softened with concentration as she picked through the remains of fallen fruit, her eyes never leaving the ground. The man hesitated. Was she a threat? Was she another survivor trying to make her way in this harsh world? He couldn't tell. But one thing was certain: she wasn't like anyone he had ever seen before. Her eyes lifted slowly, meeting his gaze for the first time. There was something unsettling about the way she looked at him, like she already knew everything about him, his every move, his every thought. Her lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "Didn't think I'd find company here," she said, her voice low and almost teasing. He took a step back, still unsure. "You alone?" he asked, his voice gruff. Her smile widened. "For now. But I don't mind the company, if it's the right kind." The words hung in the air like a challenge. He couldn't help but feel a strange pull, a curiosity that dug deeper than the usual instinct to survive. He had never felt this before, not with anyone. Not in this broken world. "What's your name?" he asked, his hand still clutching the knife. "Does it matter?" she replied, a glimmer of something playful in her eyes. "I'm not here to talk. I'm here to survive. Just like you." The man studied her, trying to read her. She was odd, even for a survivor. Her skin, her eyes, her presence. She didn't seem afraid of him, not even a little. In fact, it was as if she expected him. "Survival, hey," he muttered. "It's not easy." "Not anymore." "Nothing is," she agreed, standing up slowly. She brushed off the dirt from her clothes, though it hardly mattered. Her attire was barely enough to cover her, a simple piece of cloth that draped around her body. Yet, in this world, it was enough. Barely anything was enough. "I can help," she said, taking a step toward him. "You look like you could use it." The man's eyes narrowed. "Help? From you?" She didn't back down. "Yes. You'd be surprised what people like me can do, especially when we're in the right company." He watched her closely, his instincts on high alert. The way she spoke, the way she moved, it was all too smooth, too confident. Was it a trick? Or was there more to her than met the eye? Before he could say another word, she turned her back on him and walked toward the ruins of a nearby building. "I'm going that way." "You coming?" she called over her shoulder. There was something about her. Something that pulled at him. Against his better judgment, the man followed her. He had nothing to lose, and maybe, just maybe, she had something he needed. As they moved deeper into the ruins, she glanced over at him, her eyes gleaming with mischief. Survival's better when you have a little company, don't you think? She said, almost as if she was daring him to argue. The man said nothing, but the tension in the air between them was thick. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something bigger than he had bargained for. And then she stopped. Her eyes locked onto something in the distance, her body stiffening. The man followed her gaze. In the distance, a figure appeared, moving slowly toward them. She turned to him and whispered, "Are you ready for this?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. Will the human be able to trust her, or will she lead him into something far worse? What do you think she's hiding? Comment below and let me know. The human's eyes remained fixed on the approaching figure. The air around them felt heavier now, charged with an energy he couldn't quite explain. The woman beside him stood completely still, her posture alert, as if she were anticipating something. Or someone. The man's hand hovered near his knife again. He wasn't sure if it was the situation, her presence, or the strange pull he felt towards her that had his instincts on edge. But he wasn't about to let his guard down. Not yet. Not when survival was still the only thing on his mind. "Stay behind me," he muttered, his eyes scanning the surroundings for an escape route. The woman didn't respond, though he noticed her lips quirk up into a small smile. She seemed unfazed by the situation, almost too calm. Her eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, seemed to have their own agenda. "Don't worry," she said softly, stepping forward. "I've got this." He glanced at her, his gaze narrowing. "You sure about that?" He didn't like the sound of it. She didn't even flinch as the figure grew closer. "More than sure," she replied, her voice smooth as silk. Her words held a confidence that sent a shiver down his spine. As the figure came into view, the man's muscles tensed. It was another human, scruffy, covered in dirt, and with a hard look in his eyes. He wasn't alone either. Behind him, a group of people appeared, all with weapons in hand, eyes scanning the area for any sign of weakness. The woman beside him didn't even blink. She stepped forward again, boldly walking towards the man who had now come to a halt. "Are you lost?" she asked, her voice teasing but also steady, as if she were speaking to an old friend. The man in front of them snorted. "Lost? In a world like this? We don't get lost." He eyed the human, who remained in the shadows, clearly unsure about this strange woman. The woman's smile widened as she looked at the group of survivors. "Right. You don't get lost. But tell me, do you get hungry?" She reached into a bag she had slung over her shoulder and pulled out a small bundle of food, something that smelled like cooked meat and something sweeter. The man's stomach growled involuntarily, and he was momentarily distracted by the scent. "You want food?" she asked, holding it out toward him with a wink. "I'm sure we can strike a deal." The human watched, unsure of what game she was playing, but he wasn't about to turn down food. His stomach had been empty for too long, and the sight of the meal was enough to make his mouth water. The leader of the group, the man who had been eyeing them suspiciously, stepped forward. "What's your deal?" He was tall, with a scar running down the side of his face. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "Simple," the woman said, glancing back at the human. "I give you food. You give me something in return." The leader raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" "We don't trade with strangers." She laughed softly. "Not a stranger. Just someone who can help you." He didn't seem convinced, but the tension in the air shifted slightly. The group behind the leader shuffled, clearly hungry. The man stood silently, trying to gauge the situation. He was still wary, his instincts telling him that nothing about this situation was as simple as it seemed. "We're not interested in your games," the leader said, his hand twitching toward his weapon. The woman held up her hands. "Not a game. A deal." She tossed a piece of fruit toward the leader, who caught it with a smirk. "One meal for one favor. That's all I'm asking. No tricks." The human watched as the man sniffed the fruit, then took a cautious bite. His expression shifted, as if he hadn't expected something that tasted so good in a world like this. "Deal," the leader said finally, a grin spreading across his face. "But you better keep your end of the bargain, woman." The woman's smile grew, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I always do." The human couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. This wasn't a simple exchange, it felt like something much bigger was at play, something she wasn't telling him. But for now, he had no choice but to go along with it. As the group continued to eat, the woman walked back to him, her eyes gleaming with a hint of something that made him uneasy. "Well," she said with a sly grin, "that wasn't so hard, was it?" He narrowed his eyes at her. "What are you really after?" She shrugged, a playful glint in her eyes. "A little trust. A little cooperation. And maybe a little fun." The human shook his head. "Trust is hard to come by these days." "Then let's make sure we build it, one step at a time," she replied, her voice low and almost seductive. The human didn't know what to make of her words, but he wasn't about to back down. Not now. There was something in her, something he couldn't quite understand, but it made him want to stay close. But what was her real plan? Was this all part of her game, or did she have other intentions? What do you think she's really after? Let me know in the comments below. The tension in the air was thick. The group had accepted the deal, and now they were making their way through the ruins of what had once been a thriving city. The human kept his distance, but his eyes constantly darted toward the woman. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that there was more to her than just the sweet words and playful banter. They moved through the empty streets, the sounds of their footsteps echoing off the cracked pavement. The leader of the group was up ahead, walking with a confident stride, but every now and then, he would glance back toward the woman with a look that wasn't quite friendly. The rest of the group moved in silence, clearly on edge. The woman, however, seemed unaffected by the unease around her. She walked beside the human, her eyes scanning the horizon, always alert. Every now and then, she would glance at him, her gaze lingering just a little longer than necessary, as if she were studying him. "You're quiet," she remarked, her voice teasing. "Not used to silence." He didn't respond at first, his mind still racing. There was something about her that didn't add up. She was too confident, too comfortable in this world of chaos and danger. He wasn't used to people like her, people who seemed to thrive in the madness. "I'm thinking," he finally said, "about this deal we made." She raised an eyebrow. "You're wondering if I'll keep my end of it?" He didn't answer, but the question hung in the air. His instincts told him that the woman was playing a game, one he wasn't sure he could win. She had already proven she could manipulate the situation, charm her way through dangerous encounters. He wasn't sure if he was just another pawn in her game, or if he was someone she could trust. The woman stopped walking and turned to face him, her gaze locking onto his. For a moment, it felt as though the entire world had paused. The noise of the city, the movement of the group, it all disappeared. It was just the two of them. "You're smart," she said softly. "You know something's wrong. You can feel it, can't you?" He stared at her, not sure how to respond. She was right. There was something about her, something that made him question everything. But he wasn't about to let his guard down. Not with her. "I'm not stupid," he said, his voice low. "I know people like you." She chuckled softly, a sound that sent a chill down his spine. "People like me," she repeated, her eyes gleaming. "What, you think I'm just some pretty face who can't handle herself? Or maybe you think I'm hiding something?" The human didn't reply. Instead, he watched as the rest of the group moved ahead, unaware of the silent tension building between them. But he knew she was more than she seemed. And he had a feeling that if he didn't stay alert, he'd end up getting tangled in something he couldn't escape from. Suddenly, there was a shout from up ahead. The group had stopped in front of a large, crumbling building. The leader waved them forward, his eyes scanning the area cautiously. The woman smiled at him, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. "Let's go see what they found, shall we?" He followed her, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. As they entered the building, the sound of their footsteps echoed through the hollow space. Dust and debris hung in the air, and the scent of decay lingered, a constant reminder of the world that had once been. The group spread out, searching for anything of value, weapons, or supplies. But the human kept his focus on the woman. She had moved to the far side of the building, her movement smooth and purposeful. She had a way about her, a confidence that was almost dangerous. And yet, there was something about her that intrigued him. Maybe it was the way she seemed to understand him without a single word being exchanged. Or maybe it was the way she looked at him, as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. He couldn't help it, he had to know more. He moved toward her, careful not to make a sound. But as he got closer, he saw something that made his heart stop. The woman was speaking to the leader, quietly, urgently. Her voice was low, but the words were sharp. She was negotiating something. The human couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see the tension in their body language. The leader's face was tight with frustration, and the woman's smile was too sweet, too knowing. Suddenly, the human's instincts kicked in. Something wasn't right. The woman wasn't just helping them, she was controlling the situation. She was manipulating them, playing everyone like a game. His mind raced. He had to act fast. He wasn't going to let himself be used like everyone else. Not by her. But just as he was about to make a move, the woman turned and caught his eye. Her smile widened, her eyes flashing with mischief. "Not everything is as it seems, you know," she said, her voice low and teasing. The human's breath caught in his throat. Was this a game? Had she been leading him into this from the start? Or was she testing him, seeing if he would take the bait? Before he could answer, the leader turned toward him, his expression hardening. "Got a problem, human?" the leader asked, his hand resting on the handle of his weapon. The woman stepped in between them, her hand lightly brushing the leader's arm. "No problem," she said sweetly, but her eyes never left the human. "We're all friends here, aren't we?" The human's mind raced. He wasn't sure who to trust anymore. What is the woman really after? Is she controlling everything, or is there something even bigger at play? What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The day had been long, filled with uneasy exchanges and tense moments. As night fell, the group found shelter in a derelict building. It was nothing more than a shell, broken windows, collapsed walls, and remnants of old furniture scattered about. But it was safe enough for the night. Safe enough, at least, until the next day. The human, exhausted from the day's events, sat against a crumbling wall, his back against the cold stone. His mind raced with thoughts of the woman. He couldn't stop thinking about the way she moved, the way her eyes seemed to see right through him. She had played him, sure. But there was something else, something more. It was as if she knew exactly how to keep him on edge, to keep him questioning everything he thought he knew. And it was working. He glanced over at her, watching as she moved around the room, gathering bits of wood to start a fire. Her movements were fluid, confident, and she didn't seem to care about the danger that surrounded them. She was too calm, too controlled. She caught him watching her, and this time, she didn't look away. She smiled. It was that same smile, mysterious, playful, and full of secrets. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice soft but laced with curiosity. She walked toward him, stepping over the debris with ease. He hesitated. Was he supposed to answer her? He had been thinking about everything, how she had gotten them this far, what her real intentions were, and why he couldn't stop feeling drawn to her. But he wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing that. "Nothing," he muttered, trying to sound uninterested. But she wasn't fooled. She sat down beside him, close enough that he could feel the heat of her body radiating. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a challenge. Her eyes locked onto his. "I don't believe you," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I think you're thinking about me." His heart skipped a beat. He didn't want to admit it, but part of him was. Part of him was wondering just who she really was and what she wanted. But he couldn't let her know that. Not now. I don't think about you, he replied, his voice low, trying to keep his cool. I'm just trying to survive. She leaned closer, her lips curling into a teasing smile. Oh, I think you're lying. Her hand brushed against his arm casually, sending a jolt through him. You're not as tough as you want everyone to believe. He stiffened at the touch, but didn't pull away. I'm tougher than you think, he said, his voice rough. She didn't reply at first, instead just staring at him with those piercing eyes. It was as if she were studying him, figuring out every little thing about him that he tried to keep hidden. And then, without warning, she leaned in even closer, her lips almost touching his ear. Her breath was warm, sending a shiver down his spine. Prove it, she whispered, her voice barely audible. His pulse raced. Was she daring him? Playing with him? He didn't know, but the tension between them was undeniable. The woman pulled back just enough to see his reaction. Her eyes glinted with amusement. She was enjoying this. I'm not your game, he said firmly, trying to regain control of the situation. But she just laughed softly, a sound that seemed to echo through the empty building. Oh, but you are. I think you've been playing this game with me all along. Before he could respond, she stood up, moving away from him. She walked to the fire she had started earlier and knelt beside it, stirring the flames. The heat from the fire warmed the room, but the coldness between them remained. The human stayed where he was, watching her carefully. He had no idea what she was thinking, but he knew one thing for sure: she had a way of making him feel things he hadn't felt in years. Things he wasn't sure he wanted to feel. As the night dragged on, the others settled down for sleep. The woman and the human stayed awake, each lost in their own thoughts. The woman kept her distance now, though every so often, she would glance over at him, her eyes lingering just a little too long. It was as if she were waiting for something, waiting for him to make a move. He resisted the urge to go to her. He couldn't let her pull him in. He couldn't let her get the better of him. But then, as the silence stretched between them, she spoke again, her voice low and full of meaning. You know, she began, her back still turned to him as she stared into the flames, there's something fascinating about humans. You think you have all the answers, but you don't. You act tough, like you don't care about anything, but I can see it in your eyes. He didn't reply, but her words lingered in the air. I can see that you care, she continued, her voice almost soft. More than you let on. He didn't know how to respond to that. Was she right? Did he care? He had tried so hard to shut out the world, to forget what it meant to feel. But this woman, she was making him question everything. She glanced over at him, and their eyes met for a moment. And that's why you'll never be able to resist me, she said with a sly smile. I know you won't. The words hung in the air between them, and for the first time since they met, the human wasn't sure what to believe. Was she playing him? Or was there something deeper, something he was too afraid to acknowledge? As the fire crackled softly, the human couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the edge of something dangerous, something he couldn't escape from, no matter how hard he tried. What is it about her that makes him feel this way? Is he falling into her trap, or is something real starting to develop between them? What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale, ethereal light over the ruins. The fire flickered and crackled, the only sound in the quiet night. The group had fallen asleep, leaving the human and the woman alone in the dim glow of the embers. He had no idea what he was doing. Or rather, he had no idea what she was doing to him. Since the moment they met, everything had changed. She had a way of making him feel alive again, but at the same time, she made him question every instinct he'd spent years perfecting. She made him feel things he hadn't felt in a long time, longing, confusion, desire, and it was all so damn dangerous. The woman was sitting on a rock by the fire, her back straight, her eyes scanning the horizon. Her movements were graceful, almost otherworldly. She had the air of someone who didn't fear anything. He watched her, the way her hair caught the flickering light, the way her body seemed to move effortlessly with the night around her. Then, without turning to him, she spoke. You're thinking about it, aren't you? Her voice was calm, almost teasing, but there was a hint of something deeper, a challenge. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he shifted slightly, sitting up straighter, his gaze still fixed on her. He couldn't tell if she was messing with him or if she truly knew what he was thinking. Maybe both. What do you want from me? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He wasn't sure why he was asking. Maybe because the question had been on his mind since the moment he saw her. She turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze with a smirk. What makes you think I want something from you? Her eyes were dark, but they held a spark of something dangerous, something that both terrified and intrigued him. I'm not stupid, he replied, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his chest. You don't give people food and shelter just for the hell of it. You want something. She chuckled softly, a sound that sent a shiver down his spine. She knew exactly what she was doing to him. Maybe I do, she said, her tone playful, but with an underlying edge. But that's the fun of it, isn't it? You don't know what I want. And you won't until you take the leap. He frowned, trying to make sense of her words. She was always so cryptic, so elusive. But that was part of the mystery, wasn't it? Part of the reason he couldn't keep his distance. She moved closer then, her presence overwhelming. It was as if she had drawn him into her orbit, and now he was powerless to break free. She stopped just a few inches away from him, her scent mingling with the smoky air from the fire. It was intoxicating. The human's heart beat faster. He could feel the heat between them now, the tension building with every passing second. You know, she said softly, her voice almost a whisper, you've been thinking about kissing me, haven't you? He froze, his breath caught in his throat. Her words hung in the air, charged with the same electricity that crackled in the fire. How did she know? Could she read him that well? He started, but the words didn't come. His body was betraying him. He wanted to push her away, to remind himself that he couldn't afford to get lost in her games. But there was something about her, something that made him want to do exactly the opposite. She leaned in slightly, her lips just a breath away from his ear. It's not so hard, you know, she whispered. A kiss. A simple thing. But it could mean everything, or nothing. Her breath was warm against his skin, sending a wave of heat through him. She knew exactly what she was doing. Every move, every word, everything was calculated. But it wasn't just the game she was playing with him. There was something real here, something that felt like it could pull him under. Before he could say anything, she pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. There was a fire in her gaze now, something deep and challenging. If you kiss me, you're taking a risk, she said, her lips curling into a smirk. But if you don't, you're taking an even bigger one. The human swallowed, his mind spinning. He wanted to resist, to tell her that he didn't fall for tricks. He wanted to walk away, to keep his distance. But deep down, he knew it was already too late. He had already stepped into her game, and now there was no turning back. She was daring him. Testing him. But she was also offering something that, if he accepted, would change everything. His breath caught in his throat as his gaze locked onto hers. His heart pounded in his chest. There was no way out. Not now. Not after everything that had happened between them. Are you going to kiss me, or are you just going to stand there? She asked, her voice a low challenge, her eyes gleaming with something dangerous. He reached up, his hand trembling as he cupped her cheek, drawing her in. The moment felt suspended in time, like the world had stopped spinning and everything was about to change. But before their lips could meet, the sound of footsteps broke the silence. The human pulled back sharply, his heart racing. The woman smiled, as if she knew exactly what had just happened. You'll have your chance, she said, standing up and brushing off the dust from her clothes. But for now, we wait. As she walked away, leaving him with a wild mix of emotions, frustration, desire, and something else, he realized just how deep he had fallen into her game. Was it really just a kiss? Or was there something more at play here? What do you think? Was it a mistake for him to get this close? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The night was far from over, and the world outside was still a wasteland of ruined buildings and empty streets. Inside the derelict building, the group had fallen asleep in makeshift beds they had scavenged from the remains of a once bustling world. The fire had died down to embers, casting a soft glow on the walls, and everything felt oddly peaceful, too peaceful. The woman, as usual, was awake. She never slept like the others. She always seemed to be watching, waiting, even when it appeared as if nothing was happening. And tonight, she was no different. The human had tried to sleep, but his mind was too active. He couldn't shake the images of her, the way she looked at him, the way she had teased him, and the way he had almost given in. It had been a kiss. A simple kiss, and yet it felt like it could unravel everything. He wasn't sure if it was desire or something darker pulling him toward her, but the more he tried to resist, the harder it became to ignore. Finally, he gave in to the restlessness. He got up, moving quietly past the sleeping members of the group. He needed some air, some space to think. He knew he couldn't keep pretending like it didn't matter, like she didn't matter. As he stepped outside, the cool night air hit his skin, and he breathed in deeply, hoping to clear his mind. The wasteland stretched before him, endless and unforgiving. The world had changed. People had changed. And yet, the need to survive, to fight for every breath, hadn't. He didn't hear her approach until she was already beside him. You couldn't sleep either. Her voice was soft, but it carried that same teasing undertone he had grown so accustomed to. She was standing close, too close, and yet, he didn't back away. No, he said quietly. Can't stop thinking. About me, she asked, a playful lilt in her voice. She stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon as if the world before them held all the answers. His jaw tightened. About everything. She didn't press him for more. Instead, she simply stood next to him, her presence both comforting and unnerving. They didn't speak for a while, just stared out into the empty expanse. There was something about this moment that felt intimate, strangely peaceful in a world that had never known peace. I don't want to be just another game for you, he finally said, his voice low. He didn't know why he was saying it, or why now, but he couldn't stop himself. The words had been building up inside him for too long. She turned her head slightly to look at him, her eyes glimmering with something he couldn't quite read. It wasn't amusement this time. It was something deeper, something more real. Who said anything about a game? She asked, her voice soft, almost vulnerable. He didn't respond, but the way she said it, the sincerity in her tone, made him question everything. Was she playing him? Or was this something else? She stepped closer, closing the space between them until they were only a few inches apart. She didn't touch him, but the air between them was thick with unspoken words. I never wanted to be just another game, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm here because I want to survive. Just like you. There it was again, the strange pull he felt whenever she spoke. It was as if her words had the power to cut through the chaos in his mind, to silence the doubts that had plagued him since the moment they met. I don't know if I can trust you, he muttered, his voice hoarse. He wasn't sure if he was saying it to her or to himself. But the truth was, trust had never come easily to him. And trusting her felt like stepping into the unknown. I don't expect you to, she replied, her voice soft and steady. Trust takes time. But if we want to survive, we need to work together. We need each other. Her words hit him harder than he expected. There was no hint of manipulation in her voice. No games. Just a raw honesty that left him feeling exposed. And in that moment, he realized something, he wanted to trust her. He wanted to believe that there was more to her than the mysterious woman who had walked into his life like a storm. But the world they lived in made it hard to believe in anything. Trust was a luxury, and survival was the only reality. I'm not like the others, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I've had to fight for everything. And I'll fight for you too, if you let me. Her words hung in the air like a promise. a dangerous one, and yet, he found himself wanting to believe it. The idea of letting her in, of trusting her, was terrifying. But it also felt right. Like they could conquer this broken world together. Before he could say anything more, she turned to face him, her gaze intense. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The way she looked at him told him everything he needed to know. And then, before he knew what was happening, she closed the distance between them. Her lips brushed against his, soft and tentative at first, as if testing the waters. But when he didn't pull away, she deepened the kiss, her arms sliding around his neck, pulling him closer. He kissed her back, unable to resist. There was no thought in it, just instinct, just desire. But it wasn't just a kiss. It was more. It was everything they couldn't say, everything they couldn't explain. As the kiss broke, she pulled back slightly, her forehead resting against his. "You're mine now," she whispered, her voice breathless, her words laden with meaning. "Whether you like it or not." His heart raced, and for a brief moment, he wondered if this was really what he wanted. But deep down, he knew the answer. There was no turning back now. Was this the beginning of something real, or was he just another pawn in her game? What do you think? Was this the right move for him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The dawn was breaking, and the first light of day filtered through the cracks in the broken walls, casting long shadows across the room. The human lay awake, his eyes wide open as he stared at the ceiling, his mind racing with everything that had happened. The kiss from last night still lingered on his lips, and the words she had whispered to him echoed in his mind like a dangerous lullaby. "You're mine now, whether you like it or not." He wasn't sure what had drawn him to her, whether it was the fire in her eyes, the way she moved so effortlessly through this ruined world, or something deeper. Something dangerous. She had pulled him in, and now he wasn't sure how to escape. The group was already stirring, preparing for the day ahead. The leader was barking orders, gathering their supplies, checking weapons. The woman was standing off to the side, her back to him, looking out the shattered window. She seemed to be in her own world, her gaze distant and thoughtful. But as he watched her, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that would change everything. He couldn't keep living like this, always on edge, always questioning who he could trust. She had become his obsession, and he didn't know if that was a blessing or a curse. He rose slowly from where he lay, his body stiff from the rough ground. The others were too busy to notice him, and for a moment, he was alone with his thoughts. He walked toward the woman, careful not to make any noise. She didn't turn to acknowledge him until he was standing right behind her. Her body tensed, but she didn't move. Her eyes flickered briefly to his, but she said nothing. He stood there for a long moment, the words he wanted to say tangled in his mind. What did he want? What did he truly need from her? "I can't keep doing this," he finally said, his voice quiet but firm. "I can't keep pretending like I don't feel something when I'm with you." She didn't react immediately. Instead, she just stared ahead, as though she were weighing his words carefully. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. "You think I don't know that?" Her voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, like she was holding back something. He clenched his fists at his sides. "I don't know what you want from me, but I'm not sure I can keep up with your games." The woman turned slowly to face him. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, anger. Hurt? But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "I never asked you to play," she said quietly, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "I'm not playing games with you. I'm trying to survive. Just like you." He stared at her, trying to find any trace of sincerity in her expression. It was impossible to read her, impossible to tell whether she was being honest or if she was just manipulating him again. "Then why did you kiss me?" he asked, his voice low. "Why make everything so complicated?" The woman's lips curled into a small, sad smile. "You kiss me too, remember?" Her gaze locked onto his, and for a brief moment, he felt like she could see right through him. "It wasn't just me pulling the strings. It was you, too. Don't pretend like you didn't want it." His breath caught in his throat. She was right, of course. He had kissed her back. He had let himself be pulled in. And now, he had to decide whether it was just the attraction, or if there was something more, something real. "I don't know if I can trust you," he said finally, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore." The woman stepped closer, closing the distance between them until they were nearly nose to nose. She reached out, her hand brushing his arm lightly, her touch sending a shock of electricity through him. "Trust is earned," she said softly. "But if you want to survive in this world, you have to learn to trust someone. Even if it's just for a little while." Her hand lingered on his arm, and for a moment, he thought about pulling away, about shutting himself off from her completely. But something inside him hesitated. She was right. Trust was hard, but without it, they wouldn't make it. Not in this world. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time, he saw more than just the allure, the mystery. He saw someone who had been through as much pain and suffering as he had. Someone who had been alone for too long, just like him. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, a small gesture, but one that felt like a promise. "I don't know if I can trust you, but I'm willing to try." She nodded, her lips curving into a small, knowing smile. "That's all I need." The moment hung in the air, fragile and uncertain. They were both standing on the edge, caught between their pasts and whatever future they could create. He wasn't sure if this was the right choice, if trusting her was the right choice. But he knew he couldn't do this alone. Not anymore. And then, as if on cue, the sound of footsteps interrupted their moment. The leader of the group appeared, his expression hard. "We move out in 5. Get ready." The woman stepped back, her hand sliding away from his. She glanced at him one last time before turning to join the others. "Let's see if we can survive another day," she said over her shoulder. He watched her go, his heart still racing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. There would be more tests, more choices, more dangers. But for now, he had made his choice. Would trusting her be the key to their survival, or would it lead to their downfall? What do you think will happen next? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.